I was told not to ruin my brother's engagement party. That I bring bad luck. They didn't whisper it. They said it out loud. The words landed like a blade, but I stepped into the ballroom anyway, my heels clicking on polished marble, my daughter Myra's tiny hand anchoring me to the earth. The room shimmered, golden chandeliers dripping light, silk drapes catching the glow, laughter slicing through the air like static. Mira, 7 years old, tugged my sleeve, her eyes wide at the heart-shaped flower arch woven with roses and jasmine, the tiered cake sparkling like a chandelier under the spotlight. I forced a smile for her, but my jaw was clenched, my pulse hammering in my throat. I wore navy blue, long sleeves, modest, unremarkable. A dress that whispered, "Don't see me." I'd spent a lifetime perfecting that disguise, telling myself I'd blend in, stay quiet, survive the night. But the air crackled with tension, like a storm waiting to break. The scent of jasmine hung heavy, reminding me of the wilted blooms I'd seen by the entrance, a faint echo of the warmth my father once brought to rooms like this. The crowd parted as Reed, my baby brother, stood on stage in a cream sherwani embroidered with gold, looking like he'd stepped from a magazine cover. Beside him, Sabrina, the bride-to-be, radiated like a queen in her ivory lehenga, diamonds glinting at her throat, her eyes scanning the room as if pricing every soul. Then she saw me. Her smile tightened, a hairline fracture in her flawless facade, like she'd spotted a smudge on her perfect day. She leaned toward my mother, Nadia, and whispered something behind a manicured hand. Nadia didn't blink. That woman could bury you with a glance and a sip of tea, her silk sari rustling like a warning. She crossed the floor, heels slicing the air, and stopped before me, her perfume sharp and cold. "Layla," she said, voice low, almost kind, which cut deeper than a shout. "Stay away from the stage. Sabrina doesn't want bad luck near her today." Bad luck. I stared, waiting for a laugh, a retraction. Nothing. Just her face, smooth as stone. "She's right," she added, eyes narrowing. "Your timing's always been unfortunate. Let's not ruin this for Reed." I wanted to scream, to drag every buried wound into the light, every slight, every dismissal, every moment I'd been erased. But anger was a luxury I'd never been allowed. So I nodded, lips pressed so tight they ached, and stepped back into the shadows. A question burned, raw and unyielding. Why am I still letting them do this to me? My feet felt welded to the marble, as if moving would shatter me. Bad luck near the stage. Not a request, an exile. Mira looked up, her brown eyes searching, braids swaying with a single blue ribbon tied at the end. "Mama, are we going to the front?" Her grip on my hand tightened, small fingers warm against my cold ones. At 7, she could sense the shift, the unspoken weight in the air. I forced a smile, swallowing the knot in my throat. "We'll stay right here, sweetheart." She nodded, trusting me completely, but rage coiled inside. Hot, sharp, a wildfire I couldn't douse. My mother had just drawn a line between me and the family, in public, on the most photographed day of Reed's life. No one stopped her. Not Sabrina. Not Reed. Especially not Reed. Yesterday, I'd gotten a call from Tara, an old coworker who'd moved across the country. "Layla, I was thinking of you," she'd said, voice bright through the static. "Remember that night you stayed late to fix my presentation? I'd have lost that client without you. You're one of the good ones." I'd laughed it off, embarrassed, but her words clung to me like a warm scarf in this frigid room. Tara saw me, saw the hours I poured into others, the quiet ways I showed up. My family didn't. Across the room, Nadia laughed with Sabrina's mother, her smile radiant, the kind she reserved for anyone but me. She adjusted Sabrina's dupatta, her touch gentle, almost maternal, as if Sabrina were the daughter she'd always wanted. Then her eyes flicked to me, holding Mira by the dessert table. Her face darkened, a shadow of something, envy, regret, resentment, gone as fast as it came. It sliced through me, sharp as a memory. Sabrina leaned toward Reed again, her whisper sharp enough to carry. He tensed, shoulders stiff under his sherwani, but nodded. It hit like a fist. She was pulling the strings, and he was letting her. Earlier, I'd overheard her by the bar, her laugh tinkling like ice in a glass. "Reed's sweet," she told a friend, but I wouldn't have looked twice if he wasn't from this family. I dismissed it as a careless jab, but now it gnawed, a splinter under my skin. Reed didn't look my way. The brother I'd raised when our father died, who'd clung to me during thunderstorms, who'd sobbed on my shoulder after his first heartbreak, now stood under a canopy of fairy lights, smiling for strangers, while I faded behind a potted palm, its leaves brushing my shoulder like a mockery of comfort. The MC's voice boomed over the speakers, smooth and practiced. "Ladies and gentlemen, the ring ceremony is moments away. Family, please gather toward the stage." Guests rose, a tide of silk and sequins, phones flashing, laughter spilling like champagne. I stepped forward, one instinctual step, my heart tugging me toward Reed. That's what you do when your brother's getting engaged. You show up. Your family. But Sabrina's eyes locked on mine through the crowd. No smile. No warmth. Just a single raised eyebrow and a smirk, slow and satisfied, that said, "I win." Her gaze lingered, daring me to cross the invisible line she'd drawn. It wasn't about a stage. It was about power. About reminding me, again, that I'd always be an afterthought, a blemish to be airbrushed from their perfect picture. My palms clenched, nails biting skin. I wanted to scream, to shatter the chandelier with my voice. But Mira tugged my sleeve, her ribbon catching the light. "Mama, why aren't we going?" I crouched, heart pounding, forcing my voice steady. "Some people don't know how to treat what's special, sweetheart." Mira tilted her head, her ribbons slipping slightly. "But there are family, right?" I opened my mouth, but no words came. How do you tell a child that family can wound deeper than strangers? I smoothed the front of her sky-blue dress, fingers lingering on the fabric. "They are. But sometimes family forgets how to be kind." She blinked, too young to carry that truth. I envied her innocence, her unscarred heart. Suddenly, I was 8 again, rain pounding the windows the night my father died. Red and blue lights flashed through the curtains, painting the walls in grief. I held Reed, just 4, his small body trembling against mine as neighbors whispered in the doorway. She was always his favorite. Maybe he shouldn't have spoiled her. One aunt muttered, loud enough to stick, "That girl's bad luck." Nadia didn't correct her. She stood by the window, staring into the storm, then turned and looked at me like I was a stranger. Weeks before, he'd pulled me onto his lap, his voice warm as he said, "Take care of your mother and Reed, Layla. They need you." That promise became my chain, binding me to them even when it tore me apart. After that night, Nadia's warmth vanished. No more sunshine, no more brushing my hair before bed. She spoke to me in clipped sentences, her eyes skimming past like I was a ghost in her house. Reed became her golden boy, the hope that survived the wreck. I didn't blame him, he was too young. He'd save me a seat at dinner, slimmy candy under the table, draw pictures with "best sister ever" scrawled in crayon. But those pictures stopped. The gap between us grew, and I stopped reaching across it. When I lost my first baby, I called her, my voice breaking, desperate for her to hold me like she once did. "I told you not to marry that man," she said, her tone cold as a winter wind. I hung up, trembling, the phone slipping from my hand. She didn't comfort, she judged. My pain was my fault, always my fault. I married young, desperate to escape her shadow. He was gentle at first, his promises soft as spring. But after the second miscarriage, he grew quiet, his eyes avoiding mine. After the third, he didn't fight. He just left. A text at 2 a.m. "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry." I stared at the screen until it went black, the silence louder than any scream. Then came Mira, my miracle. Loud, stubborn, ribbon-wearing Mira, who kicked against every odd. The doctors said I wouldn't carry to term, but she arrived screaming, her tiny fist curled like a defiance of fate. She was proof I wasn't cursed, not completely. When I brought her to Nadia, she held her for 5 seconds, her arms stiff, before setting her down like fragile glass. "I hope she doesn't grow up with your luck," she said, no smile, just a sentence that punched the air from my lungs. I stood there, cradling Mira, feeling the weight of her words settle like dust. I should have walked away then. I didn't. Because even when they cut you, part of you hopes they'll stop. That one day they'll see you. Not the ghost they blame, but the daughter who survived their storm. I should have left the moment Nadia spoke. But I stayed, whispering my practice lie. Smile. Blend in. Don't stir the pot. It was Reed's day, not mine. Never mine. Mira tugged me toward the dessert table, her voice bubbling over the hum of the crowd. "Mama, can I look at the cake?" "Just a second." Her sky-blue dress swished, her braids bouncing, the blue ribbon catching flecks of light like a beacon. "Of course," I whispered, trailing her, grateful for her brightness. She was untouched by the shadows that clung to me like damp cloth, heavy and cold. I lingered by a column near the entrance, its carved vines mocking my stillness. I sipped water I didn't want, smiled at guests I didn't know, their faces blurring into a parade of pity and distance. Their glances were rehearsed, tight lips, quick nods, a silent memo. "Be nice, but not too close. She's fragile." Or cursed. They didn't say it aloud. That would have been too honest. They spoke in micro-expressions, eye flicks, two tight smiles, asking about Myra's school but never my life. I felt like a ghost watching my own wake, present but unseen. Uncle Samir was the exception. Earlier, he'd pulled me into a side hug, his cologne warm with sandalwood. "Layla, you look radiant," he'd said, his eyes crinkling with a kindness that felt like sunlight. He lingered, asking about my new job, listening like my words mattered. In a family that offered politeness like stale candy, bitter, unwanted, his warmth was a lifeline. Now, as the MC's voice echoed again, "Family to the stage, please." The crowd surged forward, a glittering tide of silk and laughter. I moved with them, instinct pulling me toward Reed, toward the brother I'd once carried on my hip. But then I remembered. Sabrina doesn't want bad luck. I stopped, as if an invisible fence had sparked against my skin. Nadia stood center stage, arm in arm with Sabrina's mother, her smile proud, polished. She didn't look at me, not once. Reed adjusted his cuffs, the hands I'd held through childhood nightmares, his fingers steady now under the weight of a new ring he hadn't yet given. He glanced up, his eyes meeting mine for a fleeting second. Then he looked away, his jaw tight, like he'd caught himself breaking a rule. That glance cut deeper than Nadia's words, a betrayal sharper than silence. The photographer's flash popped, freezing the moment. Perfect. False. A family portrait I'd never be part of. The frame closed around them, and I stood outside it, my reflection faint in the ballroom's mirrored walls. Mira tugged my sleeve again, her ribbons slipping loose. "Mama, why aren't we going? Everyone else is, even the cousins." I bent down, willing my voice not to crack. "We're just going to watch from here, sweetheart." She frowned, her small brow furrowing. "But that's not fair." I swallowed hard, the truth too heavy to share. Sometimes we don't get to go where others do. And that's okay. It wasn't okay, not even close. But I said it because that's what I'd been trained to do. Minimize, soften, disappear. The weight crushed me, a tide pulling me under. I grabbed Myra's hand, my voice barely a whisper. "Let's go home, baby." My eyes burned, my chest tight with the effort of holding it together. I couldn't stay another second in a room that didn't want me, that saw me as a curse instead of a sister, a mother, a person. Mira pulled back, her small hand firm, her eyes blazing with a fire I didn't know she had. "Don't let them decide if we belong, Mama." Her words stopped me cold, a spark in the dark. My daughter, 7 years old, saw what I'd forgotten. I deserved to be here. I deserved to take up space. Mira climbed onto a chair beside me, her legs swinging, humming a tune she'd made up about stars and cakes. Then she stopped, her eyes narrowing as she watched the stage, Sabrina adjusting her lehenga, Nadia straightening Reed's collar with a proud smile. Myra's brows furrowed, her ribbon tilting as she cocked her head. "Mama," she said, not looking away. "That lady's mean." I blinked, startled. "Mira, shh. Don't say that." She said, "You bring bad luck." Her voice was calm, matter of fact, brutal in the way only children can be. No filter, just truth. My chest tightened, a vice closing around my ribs. Earlier, by the dessert table, Mira had overheard Sabrina's voice, sharp and careless, as she spoke to a cousin. "Keep Layla away. We don't need her jinxing this." Mira had turned to me, confused, her ribbon slipping as she asked, "Mama, why'd she say that about you?" I'd brushed it off, forcing a smile, but her small jaw had set, her eyes glinting with something fierce. Now, before I could stop her, she hopped down from the chair and marched toward the stage, her blue dress a bright streak through the sea of guests. "Mira, wait," I hissed, reaching out, but she was too fast, slipping between two women in glittering saris. My heart lurched into my throat. I pushed forward, murmuring, "Excuse me, sorry," as heads turned, whispers trailing me like smoke. She didn't run or hide. She walked with the stubborn, unshakable purpose of a 7-year-old on a mission, her ribbon bouncing with every step. The crowd parted just enough for her to reach the edge of the stage, her small frame dwarfed by the floral arch and the weight of 100 eyes. Reed saw her first, his face shifting from confusion to alarm, his hands pausing mid-cuff adjustment. Sabrina stiffened, her diamonds catching the light like shards of ice. Nadia looked down, her expression unreadable, like Mira was a stray thread in her carefully woven tapestry. Mira stepped up to the microphone, standing on tiptoes, her fingers gripping the stand. The spotlight found her, bathing her in gold, making the blue ribbon in her hair glow like a tiny flame against the dark. The room, with its chandeliers, its laughter, its lies, froze, the air itself holding its breath. She pulled the mic closer, her voice clear as a bell. "Can I say something about the bride?" Gasps fluttered across the room, sharp as startled birds. Sabrina raised a hand, her smile tight as a wire. "Sweetie, maybe now's not the time." But Mira didn't budge, her chin high, her eyes steady. "My name is Mira. I'm 7. And I heard Auntie Sabrina say something mean." My stomach dropped, a cold wave crashing over me. "Please, baby, don't." But she wasn't scared, not a tremble, not a flinch. She said my mama brings bad luck. But that's not true. My mama's the best person I know. The silence was deafening, a void that swallowed every whisper, every clink of glass. Every eye locked on her, this small girl under a wall of lights, unraveling a truth no one dared touch. "She takes care of me all by herself," Mira continued, her voice ringing with calm defiance. "She makes me soup when I'm sick, reads me stories when I have nightmares, hugs me when I'm sad. She says love should be kind and quiet, not loud and mean." Sabrina's smile was gone, her face a mask of horror, her hands clenched at her sides. "And Auntie Sabrina," Mira added, her gaze unwavering, "you weren't kind. You didn't even say sorry." The room cracked open. Her words weren't loud, they were true. And truth cuts louder than any scream. She wasn't finished. "You also said you didn't like Uncle Reed. You said he was just a good match." A collective inhale swept the crowd, sharp and sudden. Phones lowered, their screens dimming. A woman nearby whispered, "Did she just say that?" Another guest leaned forward, eyes wide, as if the air itself had shifted. Sabrina lunged toward the mic, her voice high and brittle. "She's a child. She's confused." But no one moved. No one interrupted. Because Mira wasn't just a child. She was a spark, a mirror, a truth-teller standing alone, dismantling the polished lie this family had sold itself for years. Pride surged in me, hot, fierce, full-bodied. Not just because she defended me, but because she refused the silence that had buried me for so long, the silence I'd let define me. If this moment gave you chills, stick with us for more stories that spark truth. Hit that subscribe button. It's free, and you'll never miss a fire like Myra's. For a moment, maybe longer, no one breathed. Mira stepped back from the microphone, small but unshaken, her ribbon glinting under the lights. Sabrina's face had drained of color, her perfect mask shattered, replaced by a flicker of panic that danced in her eyes like a trapped animal. She tried to recover, her voice sharp. "This is ridiculous. Children exaggerate. She's making it up." But Uncle Samir stepped forward, his movements slow and deliberate, his gray corda catching the light. He didn't rush, didn't raise his voice. He bent slightly, placing a gentle hand on Myra's shoulder, and whispered something, maybe a reassurance, maybe a thank you. Myra nodded, her small hand slipping into his, her ribbon tilting as she smiled faintly. Then he straightened, turning to the crowd, his voice calm but unyielding. "I think the little one said what many of us were too polite to admit," he said. "Kindness isn't optional. Not in family, not anywhere." A wave rippled through the room. Guests shifting, some nodding, others looking down at their plates, their champagne suddenly less appealing. A cousin near me murmured, "He's right," her voice soft but firm, like she'd been waiting for someone to say it. Sabrina's jaw clenched, her diamonds flashing as she crossed her arms. "She's been coached. She doesn't know what she's saying." "She hasn't," Samir replied, his tone steady as stone. "She just told the truth." Reed finally spoke, his voice so soft I almost missed it, barely audible over the hum of the crowd. "Sabrina, did you really say that about Layla?" She blinked, her lips parting, then closing. "It was a private conversation. But did you say it?" His voice grew firmer, a crack in his polished calm. Her silence was louder than any confession, a void that echoed across the stage. Reed exhaled, his expression unreadable, his hands falling to his sides. "You call my sister bad luck. You said you didn't even like me." "That's not what I meant." Her voice rose, desperate, her lehenga rustling as she stepped toward him. "Then what did you mean?" he snapped, loud enough to make the front row flinch. "Because I'm standing here trying to understand how the woman I was going to marry just humiliated my sister in front of our entire family and dismissed me like I'm some transaction." Sabrina took another step, her hands outstretched. "You're letting a child ruin everything we've planned?" "No," Reed said, shaking his head, his voice low but sharp. "I'm realizing I ruined it by ignoring the one person who's always had my back." He turned, slowly, deliberately, until his eyes met mine across the crowded room. I saw regret in them, raw and unguarded, but also something else, recognition, like he was seeing me for the first time in years. "Layla," he said, his voice cracking on my name. "I'm sorry." 2 words, but they hit harder than any speech, shattering something I'd held together too long. A wall of silence, of doubt, of hoping he'd notice. Sabrina scoffed, her laugh brittle, echoing in the quiet. "This is pathetic, Reed. You're making a mistake." "No," he said, his eyes still on me, then shifting to Mira. "I've been making mistakes for years." He reached into his pocket, pulled out the engagement ring, a solitaire that caught the light like a fallen star, and set it on the stage beside Sabrina. The clink of metal on wood was deafening, a sound that seemed to ripple outward, stopping every breath in the room. The entire hall went dead silent. Then he walked straight to me, his step steady, no hesitation, no performative pause. He pulled me into a hug so tight it stole my breath, his Sherwani warm against my trembling arms. For the first time in my adult life, I felt what it was like to be seen, really, truly seen. When he let go, he knelt to Mira, his eyes level with hers. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered, his voice thick. She beamed, her ribbon tilting with her grin. "I'm good luck, right?" He laughed, a sound both broken and whole. "You're more than that. You're everything this family forgot how to be." Sabrina stood frozen, her face a mask of fury and disbelief, then turned and stormed off the stage, her lehenga trailing like a comet's tail. Her sisters hurried after her, their whispers sharp as they disappeared through a side door, leaving the ring glinting alone under the lights. Nadia didn't move. She stood by the floral arch, arms crossed, her sari pristine but her brow twitching, fingers digging into her shawl. The crowd parted slightly as Uncle Samir approached her, his voice low, meant only for her. "She broke the pattern, Nadia," he said, glancing at me, then Mira. "You should thank her for that." Nadia's eyes flickered, fractured, raw, like a mirror cracked but not yet fallen. She didn't speak, didn't nod, just stared at the stage where the ring lay abandoned. For the first time, I saw something in her that wasn't control. It was vulnerability, fleeting but real. The ceremony never resumed. The guests milled about, their laughter replaced by awkward murmurs, their phones tucked away as if the moment was too raw to capture. And in that chaos, I stood still, Myra's hand in mine, feeling the weight lift, not all at once, but enough to breathe. When Reed let go of me, something shifted inside, not a break, but a realignment, like a bone finally set right after years of quiet pain. Mira skipped back to my side, her gap-toothed grin brighter than the chandeliers. "Did I do okay, Mama?" I knelt, brushing a braid behind her ear, the blue ribbon soft under my fingers. "You did better than okay, sweetheart. You showed a whole room what truth sounds like." She glowed, her smile a promise of a future free of shame, free of the shadows I'd carried too long. The next morning, my phone buzzed with Reed's name. "I hope you know how proud I am of you and Mira," he wrote. "I'm sorry it took me this long to speak up. I won't be silent anymore." I stared at the words, rereading them not because I doubted them, but because I finally believed. A crack in the wall between us, letting light through. Later that week, Reed showed up at my apartment, a brown paper box from Fleur, my favorite bakery, in his hands. No entourage, no drama. Just my brother, stepping into my small living room like he hadn't been a stranger for years. Mira ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist, her ribbon bouncing as she laughed. To her, no time had passed. Maybe in her world, it hadn't. He sat on the couch, watching her braid her doll's hair, asking about her school projects with a gentleness I hadn't seen in him since we were kids. "I should have defended you a long time ago," he said, his voice low, his pastry untouched on the coffee table. "That night, when Dad died, I heard her. She said, 'You're the reason he died, Layla.' I was too small to understand, but it stuck. Part of me believed it, even when I didn't want to." I froze, my breath catching, the memory flooding back, Nadia's voice, sharp as a blade, cutting me open in the dark. "When I was 10, he continued, his eyes fixed on Mira, "I tried to tell her she was too hard on you. She sent me to my room, said I didn't know what I was talking about. I learned fast, stay quiet, and she'd love me. They rewarded me when I ignored you. I didn't see it until Mira stood up there and said what I should have said years ago." He looked at me, his eyes glistening raw. "Do you think Mira will ever forgive me for being part of it?" I smiled, my voice soft but sure. "She already has, Reed. She's never known silence like ours." His shoulders relaxed, a weight lifting, and he reached for Myra's doll, pretending to braid its hair, making her giggle. A bridge rebuilt, not perfect, but real. Uncle Samir stopped by 2 days later, his arms cradling a small jasmine plant, its white buds just beginning to open, their scent delicate but defiant. "It grows quiet but strong," he said, placing it by my window, the morning light catching the leaves. "Like you, Layla." Even my mother called, her name on my screen freezing me mid-breath. I almost didn't answer, but Myra's courage echoed in my chest. I picked up. Her voice was formal, stiff, but there was a pause, a new kind of pause. "I wanted to see if Mira needed anything for school," she said. "And if you're doing okay." Not an apology, not warmth, but an offering, small and fragile. In our family, that was a miracle. "I'm fine," I said softly. "Myra's good. Thanks for asking." Another pause, longer this time. "Good." The line clicked off. I sat there, staring at the phone, heart pounding, not because she'd said anything grand, but because she'd said anything at all. A door cracked open, just enough to let in a sliver of possibility. That night, as I tucked Mira into bed, she yawned and pulled a folded paper from under her pillow. "I made this for you, Mama," she said, her eyes heavy but bright. I unfolded it, a drawing of me standing on a stage, surrounded by flowers, my navy dress transformed into a cascade of blues and golds. Above my head, in her wobbly handwriting, "Mama is brave. Mama is magic." My vision blurred, tears spilling for the first time in years, not from pain, but from release, from seeing myself through her eyes. I pressed the paper to my chest, my voice trembling. "Oh, Mira, it's beautiful." She grinned, already half asleep. "You're magic, Mama." I kissed her forehead, my heart full. "You're my magic, baby." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, full, alive, like air rushing back to lungs that had forgotten how to breathe. I kept waiting for the backlash, angry calls, guilt trips dressed as concern. None came. Instead, Reed knocked one afternoon, holding another box from Fleur, the scent of butter and sugar spilling into my apartment. Mira was sprawled on the rug, coloring a new picture, humming her Star and Cake song. He stepped inside, no longer a guest but a brother, and Mira tackled him with a hug, her ribbon loose from a morning of play. "I'm still figuring out how to say it all," he said later, sitting cross-legged on the floor, helping Mira color a butterfly. "But I meant it, Layla. I was wrong about so much." I nodded, my throat tight. He didn't need to say more. His presence was enough. He looked at Mira, then back at me, his voice soft. "She's got your strength. I see it now. I never realized how much it takes to stay when no one stands beside you." Uncle Samir came by again, checking on the jasmine plant, now blooming fully, its white petals stark against the green. "It makes everything feel alive," he said, his fingers brushing a leaf. He stayed for tea, telling Mira stories about his childhood, making her laugh until her ribbon fell out completely. His visits were becoming a rhythm, a reminder that family could mean more than obligation. Then came my mother's call, a second one, unexpected. Her voice was still stiff, but she asked about Myra's art class, about the jasmine plant Samir had mentioned. "It's blooming," I said, surprised she'd remembered. She paused, then said, "That's good." Jasmine always was stubborn. I almost laughed, not at her, but at the idea that she'd noticed something alive in me, even if she couldn't say it. Another crack in her armor, small but real. One evening, as I tidied Myra's room, I found a card tucked beside the small frame holding my father's photo, his smile frozen in time. Myra's handwriting covered the front, uneven but deliberate. "Dear Grandpa, I helped fix your family. Love, Mira." Inside, she'd drawn a heart with 3 figures, me, her, and Reed, under a sky of stars. I pressed the card to my chest, my eyes stinging, feeling him somewhere, smiling. Mira, my spark, was stitching us back together, not with force but with love, quiet and fierce. That night, the jasmine bloomed brighter, its white stars defiant in the dark, their scent curling through the open window like a promise of spring. Mira slept, one arm flung dramatically over her stuffed giraffe, a smudge of purple crayon on her fingers, her ribbon draped across the pillow. I stood in her doorway, letting the silence stretch, not isolation, but peace. The peace of being enough. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. "Reed, you awake?" I smiled, typing back. "Always." He sent a photo, Mira on stage, gripping the microphone, her chin high like a warrior mid-charge, her ribbon a blue flame. Then another, me, arms around her, eyes glistening, my face stunned but alive. I hadn't known it was taken. "This is when everything changed," he wrote. "Thank you for being her mother. And mine, when I needed one." My chest tightened, not with pain, but recognition, a warmth that spread like sunlight. I walked to Myra's bed and sat beside her, careful not to wake her. She stirred, blinking through sleep-heavy eyes. "Mama," she mumbled. "Did I do something bad at the party?" I kissed her forehead, my voice soft. "You did something brave, baby. You told the truth." She frowned, her nose wrinkling. Why was everyone so quiet after? "Because truth is loud," I whispered, brushing her cheek, even when it's spoken softly. She reached up, cupping my face with her small hand. "Are you proud of me?" I nodded, smiling through the burn behind my eyes. "More than you'll ever know." She grinned, her gap tooth showing. "So, I'm good luck, right?" I laughed, really laughed, the kind that starts in your belly and bubbles out, bright and unapologetic, a sound I hadn't heard from myself in years. I pulled her into a hug so tight she squealed, her giggle muffled against my shoulder. "You," I said, "are the luckiest thing that's ever happened to me." She drifted back to sleep, her breathing soft, her hand still curled in mine. I sat there, holding her, the jasmine scent wrapping around us like a quiet victory. I used to think I was cursed, that everything I touched broke. That love, for me, would always come laced with shame and silence. I was wrong. They feared my presence would bring storms. They forgot I was the one who survived them. I broke the pattern. The first to say, "No more." To choose healing over pretending. To stay soft without being small. Mira taught me what courage looks like before the world teaches you to hide it. She showed me that speaking up doesn't ruin families, secrets do. That love isn't something you earn by shrinking yourself. Maybe I'll never get the full apology I once dreamed of. I don't need it anymore. I have something better. I have clarity. I have peace. I have Mira. And I've learned that when you're no longer afraid of being seen, you become someone no one can ignore again. I'm not unlucky. I'm unbreakable. If that makes people uncomfortable, let it. Because from now on, I will never again apologize for taking up space. I wasn't the one they needed to fear. I was the one they needed to follow. And that's the luckiest thing of all. I stood, catching my reflection in the window, the jasmine plant glowing behind me like a crown of stars. For the first time, I didn't see doubt or shame. I saw Layla, survivor, mother, truth-teller. Above my head, in Myra's invisible ink, I felt her words etched into the night. Mama is brave. Mama is magic. If this story moved you, don't just listen. Be part of the movement. Subscribe now. It's free, and you'll be joining a community that stands for truth, for courage, and for voices like Layla's. Let's break the silence together.